Hello and welcome back to another podcast with me, Anonymous. Some people have said, why no video? And well, it's obvious I don't want people to know who I am and maybe recognize me. They probably will anyway, honestly, but the more discreet I am, the better. And also because I don't know how to edit stuff. I'm sorry, but I'm not an expert at editing and all that kind of thing. So if there's someone out there who can help me, then it'd be nice to hear from you. So I just want to talk a little bit today about how hard it is to leave the Jehovah's Witnesses, because a common thing that I hear, especially from my parents, particularly my mom, when it comes to leaving the witnesses, is how sort of selfish you are to leave, that it's the easy way out, that it takes more strength to stay in the organization and stuff like that. Like, it's a really selfish, easy way of just being just a selfish person, really living your own life, doing what you want to do. And it's really easy to leave. And I know that a lot of Jehovah's Witnesses, when somebody leaves the truth, as they say, especially someone they love or a family member or something, they often feel the panic because the governing body have really drilled it into people's heads that your faith is threatened. Sorry, I'm super cold today, so my voice is a bit lispy. But they say that your faith is threatened by people who leave the truth. So you should reject them. They're liars, deceivers. They just want you to take the easy way out, and you should guard against such ones. So it's kind of sad, actually, especially if you are a Jehovah's Witness watching this. You may think that people who are so-called apostates or people that just leave or fade away are just basically lazy, maybe in the truth. It's like a stereotype, really, that people that leave the witnesses are just lazy, selfish people who are a bit self-indulgent. They just want to celebrate Christmas and stuff like that. That's all they want to leave for. And they're kind of shallow. And people often just put it down to, well, they never had the truth in the first place. That's why they left. But is that true? Actually, crazily enough, no. It made me very surprised when I read, when I watched videos from ex-JW critical thinkers in particular, because I didn't realize that so many people who have left, and particularly ones who have made videos, were actually ex-Bethelites. They were ex-pioneers, missionaries, elders, circuit overseers, ministerial servants, and people who have been Jehovah's Witness for maybe all of their life until recently, or for a great many years. And these ones have left. So it's not just people who sort of sporadically go to meetings and you never see them there really, and you kind of don't even view them as a full-time member, and then they just leave. That's what the governing body want you to think, that people whose heart isn't in the truth will just basically get lazy, they give up, and they just hanker after the materialistic things in the world, and they leave. But that's not true. Some people, in fact, a lot of people that comment on my videos, when I ask people what was it that made them leave, a lot of them say that only as recently as a few months ago, some people said a few weeks ago, they were pretty much a normal witness, that they were on the ministry, they take it seriously, they read the text and comments every day, they pray and go to meetings, stuff like that. And yet something is in the back of their mind for years. And I would think it's safe to say that every Jehovah's Witness on the planet, sooner or later, thinks or feels something isn't right. And they have that question, and sometimes they're daft enough to speak about it, and they're shot down or given some kind of explanation, because the organization really does have an answer for everything. And at the end of the day, they either say that it's Satan did it, or they say Jehovah did it, or leave it in God's hands, he'll sort it out. So at the end of the day, they have an answer for everything to placate you when you have these doubts. But sooner or later, something will happen and it will make you feel like, no, I see it now, this is a false religion, I'm out of here, and they could finally go. So it's by no means easy. It's by no means something that is just a result of being lazy or your heart isn't in the truth. People who are very strong in the truth, as it were, can find it very hard to finally come to terms with what they've learned and feel that they have no choice but to leave. But it's by no means easy. A lot of people, even years later, actually struggle with feelings of guilt, doubt, stress. They have flashbacks. Certain literature sort of triggers off bad memories and feelings. And it's really hard to dig the sort of attitudes that they put in your head out, even years later. Even about stuff that's not even particularly linked with religion. It could be attitudes towards sex, toward food, toward going in a different church for a funeral or a wedding or something, or just to visit or take pictures. And you suddenly realize the vast sort of effect being one of Jehovah's Witnesses, particularly if you were raised in it, like I was, that it really has on the way you think and feel, and it has a massive impact on your life. Excuse me. So let's talk about what it's like to leave the Witnesses. Well, in my personal experience, I had doubts about the society for years, even when I was a teenager. And at the same time, I was very zealous on the field service. I pioneered. I was on the ministry quite a lot. I used to work with all different kinds of brothers and sisters. And when I started to travel the world, I always went to a Kingdom Hall, whether that was in Africa, in India, several ones in the United States, ones in France, Germany, New Zealand, Australia, Scotland, different ones in London and around the UK, and Ireland, Sweden and Norway, and more countries like that. So I always went to meetings. I always went to the memorial, no matter what. If I were dying, I would drag myself there, because I always, and even now it's drilled in my head that the one meeting that you ought to make a year is the memorial, no matter what your circumstances are. Even if you are dying, you should go. So it's not easy to suddenly go, hey, I don't want to be a Jehovah's Witness anymore, bye. That doesn't happen most of the time. Particularly if, like me, you have family members like your mum and dad, sisters, brothers, aunties and uncles, grandparents, who are in the truth and who have high positions or really take it seriously. It's absolutely almost impossible to just suddenly announce, hi mum and dad, I don't want to go to meetings anymore, that's okay, right? Because you know yourself, if you're a witness or an ex-witness, that there is no provision for leaving the organization peacefully. You can't do that. You can't just say, I don't want to be here anymore, and people will be like, okay, that's all right. Are we still on for dinner next week? People don't do that. They've been educated that if you leave the Jehovah's Witnesses, you are a traitor, you are part of Satan's world, you are selfish, the truth is not in your heart, and that you are a threat now to everybody's faith, and they need to distance themselves from you ASAP. No matter what your circumstances are. If you've just had a baby, it doesn't matter. They want nothing to do with you. If you're dying of cancer, it doesn't matter. They want to keep you at arm's length at best and never speak to you at worst. So to suddenly announce that you don't want to be a Jehovah's Witness anymore, if you disassociate yourself, if you allow yourself to be disfellowshipped, or if you just fade away and sort of let it be privately known, maybe with family members you trust, that you don't really consider yourself a witness anymore, that you lose instantly at least a good relationship with people that you love and that people that you need in your life, because you need your family. You can't just be a lone wolf forever. You can do that for so long, you can maybe move country or whatever, but you can't do that forever. You need family. And it's no joy really to go through life's kind of pleasures, like you get married or you have children or whatever, without people to share it with. Naturally, you want your mum and dad to know that you're getting married or you're having a baby or that you've moved house or you get a new job or whatever. It's natural you want to tell mum and dad, but you can't because they're not interested anymore. Their love is sadly engineered to be very conditional as a Jehovah's Witness. And we don't want to believe that, but sadly, it's true that if you were to announce that, you're not one of them anymore, or even if you were to announce that you are a Jehovah's Witness, you believe it all, but you're gay, but you're not going to practice it, but you are homosexual. Do you think that your family members would say, oh, well, fair enough, we're not going to treat you any different? No, they would look at you and be like, oh, wow, gay, we have a potential danger here, we have to watch them all the time, make sure they don't work with people of the same gender and stuff like that on the ministry. They'll always be watching you. They'll always be on edge, thinking, oh God, what if they do something? What if they get married to somebody? What if they sleep with somebody? You'll sort of be marked. And people don't want to believe that, but sadly it's true. They're very prejudiced against people who are different. So yeah, it's very hard just to leave. I really pity people who are married to people who are still Jehovah's Witnesses, particularly ones who have children, and you have that sort of horrible tension then between couples who one of them believes and the other one doesn't, and it's like they view you as the enemy, but they have to live with you. I can't imagine that your relationship would carry on or be very good after that. I should imagine it's quite strained, and at the very worst, maybe you split up or something. And then with the children, it's the tug of war, because the spouse in the truth likely will not want to believe that there are paedophiles running around loose, and that the elders, if your child is attacked or raped or touched or whatever, they will do absolutely nothing at all to help you. And in fact, if you say that you're going to go to the law about it, they will likely tell you not to do that for the same reason as they've said to everybody else and to me. Do you want to bring reproach on God's name? Are you so selfish and faithless not to leave it in his hands, because that's what you need to do? So they're not going to believe that's real, and they're going to want to take the kids to the hall. You yourself may say, I don't want my kids going there, full stop. But of course, that's not an option, because spiritual food is more important than anything else. So even if your children are at risk, well, that's second priority to getting their spiritual food, because that's how they've been taught. So yeah, it's not easy. And when you come to actually kind of get it straight in your mind why you don't want to be a Jehovah's Witness anymore, it's often not just a clear reason. It's often like sort of like a big culmination of different reasons that you want to leave. For example, with me, it was firstly the sexism within the Jehovah's Witnesses, the rape culture that they engineer, the abuse of women and children particularly that goes unreported and not dealt with, and then also the way that they teach things from the Bible which are actually lies. And the arrogance that they have, particularly with dates and history, they pretend to defer to the experts and be like, oh yeah, well we like to get information from scientists and people who know that field. But in reality, what they do is they find scientists who believe things that they agree with, and they quote them. Or they take quotes completely out of context from other people, particularly people who teach evolution, and they use that to promote their own ideas. At the same time, they ignore convincing arguments from people who believe the opposite of them, and they just don't put that in at all. And so therefore, you're only presented with one view all the time from Jehovah's Witnesses, and it's called propaganda. That's what it's called. You can have positive propaganda and negative, but propaganda is basically information that is engineered to make you think or feel or behave a certain way, to go in line with their sort of motives or little master plan they have. And that's what they do. For example, if you go on jw.org and you click on news or newsroom or whatever it's called in your country, and you have a look on there, what is the main topic when it comes to sort of outside stuff on that news page? Well, it's the Russia thing. It's the issue with the Russian government that they've banned Jehovah's Witnesses. They've put them on the extremist list along with people like ISIS and Nazis. And Jehovah's Witnesses are really being bombarded with all these sort of news articles and whatever, because it paints Jehovah's Witnesses as an organization as victims. Well, what's the use of doing that? Well, because it bolsters the overall spirit of everyone in different congregations that they are God's people because they are being persecuted. It makes them sort of strengthen their resolve to continue no matter what. It makes them realize that there's the sort of us and them. We are the goodies and they are the baddies. They're the enemy and we need to fight them when it comes to the world and governments. So there you have it. It makes people think that way. It strengthens people's resolve to remain a Jehovah's Witness and not leave to be part of the world that is persecuting them. But what about the other major thing in the news when it comes to Jehovah's Witnesses, which is the sexual abuse cover-up, which has been discovered right now, sort of in the news anyway, in mainly Australia, the United States, the United Kingdom, Ireland, Canada, the Netherlands, Germany, and probably more countries that will start to surface on the news now. What about that? Well, that doesn't paint Jehovah's Witnesses in a good light. In fact, that paints them in a terrible light. It means that their claims of we go to court to sort of praise God's name in certain things, like when it comes to the European Court of Human Rights and fighting for brothers or sisters who are in jail or whatever, or with the Russia thing, it blows that out of the water, because when you look at what the Jehovah's Witnesses have done in court with the child sex abuse thing, they have literally been described as judges as abusive, the way they try to engineer the system and sort of the law to get their own way. For example, the Jehovah's Witnesses try to use the law concerning clergymen and confidentiality and stuff like that to their own advantage. But later on they claim that they don't have clergy members at all. So the judge was a bit confused and was like, well, how can you say that you're not clergy and yet you're trying to use laws that pertain to clergymen? You can't have it both ways. You can either declare yourself as clergy and use the law, or you can say that you're not, and therefore you can't use that law. So Jehovah's Witnesses were sort of going between two things all the time to get their own way. You're not allowed to do that. I think in another case, something like they tried to get certain documents read in court, and then later on, as the case progressed, because those papers were sort of like denied at the time, the Jehovah's Witnesses realised that if those papers were read, they'd actually be seen in a bad light and they could lose the case. So then they tried to get those papers suppressed, and the judge said you can't have it both ways. Either you want these papers read or you don't. You can't change your mind halfway through the case and say, well, we don't want them anymore because it makes us look bad. If you've raised the issue, we must go forward with it. That's the way the law works. So the judges have been quite disapproving of Jehovah's Witnesses just by the way they're trying to win their cases. It's disgraceful. And the judges in Australia just cannot, they actually were quoted as saying something like they couldn't understand why the Jehovah's Witnesses were so openly hostile towards the law system and so uncooperative, when as a charity, that's very uncharacteristic of a charity to do that when they're up against the law. Because in other cases that they've had that are similar to the Jehovah's Witness scandal, the charity in question or the organisation or the business or whatever, who's sort of blanket responsible for its members' behaviours, has always cooperated, especially when it comes to providing files or documents or lists of names or whatever. They always cooperate if possible. But the Jehovah's Witnesses systematically deny everything and shut down any attempt to subpoena files or whatever. And the judges were just completely baffled as to why they would do this, because all of their actions seem to protect the rapist and not at all defend the victim whom they've already let down in the past, with detrimental results to that person. So the Jehovah's Witnesses don't want all that kind of stuff known on their website. And in fact, ex-witnesses on these Facebook groups and whatever have commented that they have brought that up with the Australian Royal Commission. They've brought it up when Jehovah's Witnesses have tried to talk to them in public or knock on their door or whatever. And the Jehovah's Witnesses have said, we've never heard of it. We don't even know this case is going on. It's fake news. That's what it is. It's not real. It's just a lie, because we've not heard of it. And if it were real, the governing body would have told us, surely. No. The Jehovah's Witnesses don't even understand the game their own leaders play. They don't even understand what kind of Jumanji they're in right now, because all they know is the side of it the governing body want to show them. So it's stuff like that that make people start to have doubts. Maybe people research on the internet after they've heard these kind of rumours, as they think they are, and they start to find out things about the witnesses which are unsavoury at the very best and disgusting at the very worst. And it's stuff like that. Even that is often not enough to make you leave. Because when I was telling my mother about the child sex abuse thing, at first she denied it and said, no, it can't be real. Then when I showed her clips and stuff from the Australian Royal Commission, their sort of broadcasts and whatever, with Jeffrey Jackson stating things that just completely made no sense, she sort of was like, oh, well, it must be fake and edited. Then when she realised that it wasn't, and in fact she realised how stupid she sounded trying to say that was the reason, in the end she kind of accepted it and then said, well, Jehovah will sort it out. And I said to her, after that long and exhausting fight, I said, if paedophilia is not enough for you to realise that this religion is dangerous and you should get out, nothing will make you go. If that's not enough, nothing will make you leave. And it was such a horrible realisation to me that even if they saw an elder raping a child in the Kingdom Hall in full view of everybody, that probably wouldn't be enough to make them leave. Because all they would think is, well, that's human beings being imperfect, but we need to leave it to Jehovah because this religion is true and ultimately is under his direction. That's not true. If Jesus Christ is really the head of the Jehovah's Witness congregations, he would not have allowed little children to be systematically raped and abused, and grown-up women in particular to be raped and abused by even their own husbands, sadly enough, and for policies to be implemented to protect those rapists and to make victims keep their mouths shut and therefore leave the truth or commit suicide or suffer from PTSD, anxiety and depression for the rest of their lives. Jesus Christ wouldn't allow that to happen. Of course people are going to get hurt, it's the way the world is, but he would not allow congregations to set up these policies which make sure that people are funneled onto these conveyor belts where they're going to get hurt deliberately. That wouldn't happen. That's just another sign that this is just a man-made false religion that is obsessed with controlling people. So yeah, even when you find out these things, even when you have doubts, even when you look at the way the organisation is run, whether it's doctrinal things, whether it's policies, whether it's the way the congregations act, whether it's bad experiences you've had with elders or abuse or whatever, sometimes it takes a lot of things at once to make you leave. It's not merely you're looking for anything as an excuse and, oh, that brother or sister sat in my seat, therefore I'm gone, goodbye, or whatever. It's often not the case. And as I said, even witnesses that leave for amazing reasons, even abuse, often suffer from guilt and feelings of doubt, and they sort of automatically want to go back to Kingdom Halls even though they know there's no point. So it's not easy at all. So yeah, I just want to make that clear to people who sort of maybe very critical of people who leave or kind of think that it's just people without faith that leave. It's not the case. If you are dedicated enough to be a pioneer, if you got baptized in the first place, if you go to meetings regularly and on the ministry, if you've let yourself be wronged, as it were, many times in the past, you go to all the assemblies, you have all the literature, you keep up with everything that's been released, you even go to Bethel or allow yourself to be a missionary in uncomfortable situations abroad, and something makes you leave, it's got to be big. Because that's not normal. The way the Jehovah's Witnesses are taught is that there is nothing else but the truth. You don't have a career. You're not allowed to go to college or go to university. And if you do, you're seen as being selfish or whatever. So you don't really have anything else to occupy yourself with, except, oh, I need to find a marriage mate and settle down and go on the ministry more. That's it. So your life is 99% concerned and preoccupied with religion. So it honestly does take a lot of strength to leave, because when you do leave, you do feel a bit like you stepped out of almost like a private boarding school into the big wide world, and everything you've ever known is behind the door that you've just shut. All the people you've ever known are there. All the rules you live by are behind you. The routine you have is now obsolete, and you have to relearn everything you've ever been taught. You have to make new friends. You often have to accept that your family is gone, they don't care about you anymore, and that's the end of that. You have to realise that if you get married, your family aren't going to be there, your friends aren't going to be there. If you have a child, they may never see your child, and you may never want them to. It's stuff like that you have to sort of really come to terms with, and that may take years to do. So yeah, if you are a Jehovah's Witness watching this, be careful how you judge people who leave. Do not assume, oh, they left because they were lazy. They left because they were selfish or self-indulgent. They just wanted to eat black pudding and watch soaps and celebrate Christmas. No. A lot of people do those kind of things on the sly and stay in the organization because it's easier to do both. It is not easy to leave by any means, especially if you live in the same area that you've always lived, because you're always going to bump into witnesses that you know or your family members, and you have to do the whole walking past them without looking or speaking, and it's not nice. It causes a lot of stress and anxiety and pressure. So people who leave, it's for no light reason that they do that. And that's something that I wish that my mom would realize, because I think even she thinks that I'm just taking the easy way out. I'm not. When you leave, I've said this before, it's like you are tethered to the organization by a very strong piece of elastic, and every step further you take away, you feel the resistance pulling you back. You feel the disapproval and the strength and the power and the ownership of the congregation trying to pull you back. And it's really hard to walk away. It's much easier just to let go and go, okay, well, fine, I'll get back into my routine. I'll keep going to meetings. I'll just keep going on the ministry, because it's easier just to go with the flow. Of course it is, especially if all your friends and family are there. It's easier just to carry on the way you've been going. Don't rock the boat. Just go with the flow. It's much easier. Don't resist. It's much harder to try and swim against the current and say, no, I'm out of here, and be walking with that piece of elastic attached to you. But the good news is, even though you may walk for miles, that elastic does finally slacken, and then eventually it does snap, and you're free. But it does take a lot of effort and strength and mental sort of dedication to think, no, I'm not going back. No, and remind yourself of why you're leaving. It does take a lot of mental strength. It's not easy, especially when you have family members texting you or emailing you or trying to talk to you saying, come back, you've left the truth, you've left God, we're heartbroken, stuff like that. Do not give in to that kind of stuff, because let's face it, everyone of every religion or cult faces the same thing. Think of people whom the Jehovah's Witnesses have converted from religions like the Catholics, from the Muslims, from Jews. They all have the same thing. Family members saying they're disappointed in them. Family members warning them, Jehovah's Witnesses are crazy, what are you joining them for? Oh, that means we can't have Christmas together. That means we can't do this. That means we won't want to talk to you anymore for whatever reason. They face the same thing. But Jehovah's Witnesses will tell those people not to give up. They remind people of scriptures where it would say, well, those who give up mothers and fathers and brothers and sisters and lands and fields will get those back 1,000-fold in the truth. So they use that kind of logic against you, that, well, we recognize that you give up things and make sacrifices, but don't worry, you can have those things again. Well, although they would hate to admit this, it's the same. It works the same way when you leave the witnesses. Yeah, you're going to leave family, friends, businesses sometimes, everything behind sometimes. You're very lucky if most of the people you know aren't Jehovah's Witnesses, but sadly for most of us, people that we do love are left behind. But sometimes you have to do that and remind yourself of why you're doing that. And sometimes people come out with you. I have heard very encouraging experiences of people who have left, and their parents or spouses or whatever at the beginning have said, no, I'm going to be a witness no matter what. And then as the years go by, they too have doubts, they too see the truth, and they do leave. So it's not always the end of the world if you leave people behind. But anyway, yeah, I do hope that people can relate to things I've said, that if you are a Jehovah's Witness, that maybe your viewpoint has changed a little bit on people that leave, and maybe come to understand them, and don't judge them so harshly when you see them, or your own family members who have left. Don't forget that the organisation bans you from talking to people who have left for a reason, because they know that if you talk to somebody who's left and they reveal to you things about like the sex scandal or abuse that they've suffered, or doctrinal things, or like the United Nations thing, and they'd be branded as apostates and have been disfellowshipped quickly, that it could make you think, hang on a sec, I didn't think that we did that. I thought people were disfellowshipped for serious sins like fornication, or if they don't stop smoking or they take drugs or whatever. I didn't realise that people could get disfellowshipped for reading stuff on the news. Oh, and then they start to think themselves, and then they may leave. So that's why they don't let you talk to them. That's why you have to watch videos like this on the sly at home and hope that no one ever checks your browser history. Because sadly, the Jehovah's Witnesses' preoccupation is not really with the truth, it's with keeping members and getting more. just like every other business, because sadly that's what it is. It's a money-making scheme. If you don't believe me, watch the JW broadcasts and look at the governing bodies members. You will see them sporting a Rolex watch. Well, that's not cheap. So where do they get the money for that? Because they don't work. So don't tell me that it's not a money-making scheme when the governing body members and circuit overseers they are looked after by the organisation. They have company cars, they have residences where they live, they get their meals and expenses paid for them. So don't tell me that this isn't a profit-making scheme, because it absolutely is. If you can live for free and all you have to do is go on TV once a month and control people's lives, then I'd say that you're doing pretty well. I wish someone could tell me how to make money that way, because I would do it instead of going to work like everyone else. So yeah, please continue commenting, please continue subscribing. I hope that you've enjoyed it and seeing a little bit of me, so something to focus on instead of a black screen or some delightful orchids that I found. So yeah, keep talking, keep open discussion, and thank you for listening, and peace out. Bye.